the hyphenate from the MLB Network as well as Fox Sports and the NHL Network as well, John Paul Morosi. Good to see you, bud.
Rich, it is great to be back. And, of course, Brady and Jeter, a couple men, as you do, with Michigan ties. Derek was on campus briefly.
Now, for a cup of coffee, correct?
Yes.
Was he there in Michigan?
He never played for the Maize and Blue, of course, because he signed, but he attended classes there and trained there for a semester.
Now, was that as leverage at the time against the Yankees?
It's a great
was he using
question.
that in a way for leverage
It's
against
a great
the Yankees?
question. I think he was there, and I may not have the exact particulars of the story right, Rich, but I believe when he was there, it was during the lockout following the baseball strike, and I think
95.
he was actually there when Alan Trammell was on campus as an assistant coach because he didn't have anything to do with baseball being out. So I think actually Jeter and Trammell were on campus at U of M at the same time.
So the 94 season goes kaput.
Right.
Just around then is when Jeter is
signing his pro contract.
Yeah, he's kicking the tires. Well, he won't do any Thornton Mellon. He's not going back to school.
No.
That's for sure. Now that he's down there in Miami, let's start with that right now. How do you see Miami's season playing out? Again, I know that we don't usually talk about teams that are 15 games under 500, but when you've got somebody like Jeter in the front office and all the news that had been in the spotlight cast on him prior to the season, his Real Sports conversation with Brian Gumbel was fascinating.
Yes.
Don Mattingly sitting there in the dugout. What do you think about what the Marlins have been able to put on the field here?
Well, Rich, they're still in the very early stages of this rebuild, and they're in a very competitive division. The Mets have regressed a bit, obviously, since the start of the season, but the Nationals still going for it, and the Phillies and the Braves being in first place, their rebuilds are ahead of schedule. So I think it really underscores the challenge in front of them. But I give Derek credit for articulating the process that they want to have and staying with it. And I think they'll probably make a couple more moves at the deadline this year. Maybe Justin Bour could be traded out. Miguel Rojas, Derek Dietrich, they have some pieces there to move. JT Realmuto is probably the one that has the most value, but they want to keep him internally. But it's a challenging division right now, Rich, because of the quality of both the Braves and the Phillies joining now the Nationals. Tough division, I believe, for the next several years.
About 3 weeks to go until the All-Star break. We're going to be in D.C. Our show will be in D.C. the day of the Home Run Derby, All-Star Tuesday, and then Wednesday as well. What do you think the story of the baseball season is right now, John?
I think, Rich, to me, we are seeing the Red Sox and Yankees back to their customary position as the big two in baseball. Now, certainly the Astros are there, the defending World Series champions. Their record is basically the same as the two teams in the American League East. But it's taken me back now 15 years, basically to that time right before the Red Sox broke the curse, that we're seeing the Red Sox and Yankees sustainably being arguably the two best teams in the game. Again, they've both sort of been on the stage and away from the stage based on their mini rebuilds, and the Red Sox have had some boom and bust cycles where they've been a World Series team and then gone back down to the bottom of the division. But I think now we're seeing those two teams back, along with the Astros, as being the classes of the American League. And I think, too, we've got a number of great young stars, Rich. We talk a lot about where we're at as a sport, and Mike Trout gets better and better by the year, and where maybe those next baseball icons are coming. To me, they're here. They've already arrived in Trout and Nolan Arenado. Bryce Harper's numbers are down a little bit this year, but still I think the superstar quality is there for him. And this next generation of players we're seeing come in, Ozzie Albies and Gleyber Torres with the Yankees. I think a really exciting time to be a fan of the national pastime.
Well, yeah, and then you have the defending American League MVP and Jose Altuve just lighting it up again for the Houston Astros. And let's hit on Trout a little bit here. Our show is every single day broadcast on Angels Radio here in Southern California, KLAA AM 830. And Trout is as great as ever. And Pujols in his dotage on occasion can put the ball out of the yard. Ohtani, what a unfortunate turn of events it's been for him with his injury. But where do things stand in year 1 million of the Mike Scioscia era for the Angels, John?
It's a great question, Rich, because they're at a spot now where the A's, as we speak today, have now tied them for third in the American League West. They have been a little listless since Ohtani's been out, I think, as a team. Trout, again, brilliant as ever, but collectively they've had some injuries now with the pitching staff as well. Garrett Richards being on the DL. Zach Cozart, a really key member of their everyday lineup. He has been out as well. So the A's, with a lot of youth and momentum now, have caught them. And they're still 7 games back of the Mariners for the second wild card. So the chances of Trout getting back to the playoffs now, he's only been there once in his entire career. The chances for Trout getting back to the playoffs now are getting slimmer by the day. And I really think, Rich, for us, those of us that follow baseball every day, we see how brilliant Trout is. But I think for him to take that next step as being not just the best player in baseball, but American sports icon, he's got to get back to the playoffs. He has played 3 postseason games in his career, and he has won none of them. And I think that until he gets to that level again and has success, that to me, we talked about Jeter a moment ago. The magic of Jeter, yes, a great player. He's going to the Hall of Fame. But part of his legend was he played for the Yankees, and he won all those World Series rings right at the beginning of his career. He was there every time we ever turn on our TVs in October. He was there. And Trout hasn't been there. And I think for the sport to have that iconic player in Trout, he has to get there at some point in time on a consistent basis.
Well, I mean, you could, in terms of certain metrics, best numbers in the history of the game.
Yes.
Through 1,000 career played games for Mike Trout. Best ever. I mean,
you're right.
I don't even need to go down the list of people who have played baseball.
He is the mantle of our time.
How is it not translated into October visits and wins then?
It's a great point, and really I think it's been inconsistent pitching for the Angels for a long period of time. They've had some near misses. They've had some quality teams that have just fallen just short, including last year where they were really competitive to the very end. But it's been a difficult story, I think, for baseball to wrap its mind around how a player this great can be on a team that doesn't make the playoffs. And that's where I think it's fundamentally different. We talk about the comparison between LeBron and Mike Trout. LeBron is in the playoffs every year. He's basically in the finals, at least in recent times, every single year. And the NBA is a sport where one player can exert that level of influence on the entire team and dominate a game. You know, if you're watching LeBron play, you're probably going to see him score 25 a night no matter what. With Mike Trout, he may go 0 for 3 on that particular night, and one player in baseball cannot will his team to the playoffs in the way that I think LeBron James can.
Well, my kids know him. I mean, my kids dig him. They know who Mike Trout is, and hopefully, but they live here in Southern California. The Honda Insider Report with J.P. Morosi, John Paul Morosi of MLB Network and Fox Sports joining me here on the show. And yet, again, you mentioned they're within an area code,
right?
For sure, along with the A's, of that second wild card spot, where all you need to do is go on the road and seemingly, I think what you're going to have to do, beat a 100-win team named the Red Sox or the Yankees. Isn't that amazing? I mean, is there some conversation to be had in Major League Baseball about making it more than just a one-game-and-out situation for a team to win 100 games and then have an opportunity to maybe just get beat on any given night, as it can happen in baseball?
Yes.
Okay.
It is a topic. And we saw it actually a couple of years ago where the best 3 records in the game all came from the NL Central. We had that wild card game between the Pirates and the Cubs.
Right.
And the Pirates, I believe, were a 99-win team out with 1 loss at home. And actually, we talk about the dominance of the American League. One quick point on that. The Red Sox, Yankees, and Astros, if they all finish with a .650 or better winning percentage, which they all very reasonably could do, it'll be the first time we have 3 teams with a .650 or better winning percentage in the major leagues since 1942. So we're seeing this really top-heavy structure of the game right now.
Well, Mike, that's an old gen stat. Hit old gen stat right there. Hold on. That's an old gen stat from John Paul.
Old gen stats.
We had our first 1942 reference.
I mean, that's an old gen stat right there. Okay.
Bananas, man.
So, wow, that's...
Yeah. And so as my winding answer came back around to the actual question, which was the playoff structure, could we see it change?
Yeah.
And the answer to that is once baseball gets to 32 teams, which I believe they will, the commissioner has said he wants to do that. You look at the structure of the game at that point in time, and Jason Stark's written about this recently, and I think very eloquently and insightfully about where things stand. Once baseball gets to 32 teams, then you have 8 divisions of 4 teams, probably a universal DH across baseball, and the first round becomes a best of 3 where you're able to welcome in more playoff teams.
John Paul Morosi here is part of the Insider Report, which is brought to you by our friends at Honda and the 4th of July sales event. It's the best place to get a great deal on a new Honda like the Accord, Civic, or Fit. So head to your local Honda dealer today for a sizzling deal on a Honda you will love. When we come back, I want to hit a little bit more on some of the young players that we haven't heard much about. Talk a little bit about the looming trade deadline and who might be coming to Los Angeles to play third base or shortstop. most likely shortstop from the Baltimore Orioles. I think you know where I'm going at there with Manny Machado. And a little bit more conversation on one of those young players that you've already mentioned. That's with John Paul Morosi when we come back here on the Rich Eisen Show. John Paul Morosi of Fox Sports and MLB Network here. He is, Ozzie Albies, the youngest Braves player at 21 years old to hit a walk-off home run since Andrew Jones did it at 20 years old in 1997. Is that considered an old gen stat when it's over 20 years old involving somebody who was 20 at the time? Is that an old? Is that technically an old gen stat?
Technically, if you're not born yet when you beat the stat, I think that counts.
How good is this kid, man?
He's special, Rich. And at one point in time, the Braves had the 3 youngest players in the National League all on their active roster. Albies, Ronald Acuna Jr., and Mike Soroka from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, the right-handed pitcher. And Albies, if you look at his projections right now, probably going to hit more than 30 homers this season. I believe he'll be the first 21-year-old middle infielder to do that since Alex Rodriguez. He is that good. And middle infielder, premium ability, I think the Braves, Rich, I love the story about Atlanta getting good again because there are a lot of people who grew up in the 90s watching TBS all around the country, not just in the Southeast. I know Curtis Granderson, for example, grew up in Chicago, Braves fan, because this was the team that everybody watched in the 90s. So
our buddy Marshall Falk growing up in New Orleans is a Braves fan because all he could watch in the Bayou were Braves games on the Super System.
Exactly. So the Braves we talk about teams with national profile in baseball.
Yeah.
The Braves have it. Maybe not quite in the way that the Yankees or Dodgers do, but in their own unique way. And so to me, it is great for baseball that the Braves are in first place and potentially go back to the playoffs.
They've got the largest lead of any team in the National League right now at 13 games over, 3.5 better than Philadelphia as Milwaukee leads the Cubs, who are in Dodger Stadium tonight at 2.5. And the Dodgers, who beat the Cubs last night, I mean, they're 7 over right now. And Kershaw is not even done a single thing this year, essentially.
He's pitched basically 9 innings since the 1st of May. And the Dodgers have the best record in baseball by a wide margin since May 17th. On the morning of May 17th, they were 10 games under. As you mentioned, now 7 over. I mean, they have had a transformation. I think the getting healthy has helped them. I think some great stories like Max Muncy, what he has done for them, has been extraordinary. Cody Bellinger.
By the way, Max Muncy sounds like somebody straight out of the Natural.
You're right.
Max Muncy
Max Murphy was the sports writer.
Yes, he was the
Max
Robert Duvall.
That's right.
Sports writer cartoonist as well.
Exactly.
He was drawing. He was drawing his stuff too.
Great memory. Yeah.
Okay. Max Muncy. What a name. And the Dodgers lead the National League in home runs right now.
Matt Kemp. Matt Kemp is going to be an all-star. There was a thought that he might have been released at the end of spring training, that basically that trade was a financial transaction only. It was to help accommodate the luxury tax. And he is going to be an all-star, Rich. He is playing. This is basically, he has wound back the clock 10 years. And I love that about baseball, how every now and then we will have a season that defies any reasonable expectation. And right now, Matt Kemp is doing that for the Los Angeles Dodgers.
It's amazing. It's amazing how that's happening right now. JP Morosi here on the Rich Eisen Show. So you've got that going on in the National League West. Houston is as good as it gets, man. We had AJ Hinch on last week.
He's a great manager, Rich.
I just love talking to him.
He is a great conversationalist, great leader.
Oh, man. And I made the mistake of asking him, hey, would you be up for getting rid of the shift?
And his answer?
Absolutely not. And I'm like, but as a fan, I don't want to see Bryce Harper bunt. I don't want to see, hey, here's half the field, Bryce, go there.
Yeah.
I want to see him swing and he's like, well, Bryce is good enough to hit it out of the park to left field. Because to me, it's just I don't know. These guys are so good at figuring out exactly where to place people right now.
You're right.
I don't know how do you know the scouting process and how shifts are actually put into place? Because to me, I think, as you pointed out, I think you might not be on the air, but when you were sitting down, the strikeout,
the 3 true outcomes, walks, strikeouts, home runs.
That's been happening in baseball right now. We've got to get some more sprinkling, some other stuff, and I think the shift is the problem.
Exactly. To your point, Rich, I think it makes hitters all the more focused on trying to elevate the ball. If they feel like anything on the ground is going to be an out and that the shift is taking away their hits, they're going to become increasingly focused on elevating the ball. And that's what we're seeing right now. I think, Tom Verducci's done some great work on this and analyzing it and what might happen. Two possibilities. Either you have a mandate of having 2 fielders on either side of second base for every pitch.
Yes.
Or, and Tom has made a great point about this, potentially forcing all infielders to have at least 1 foot on the dirt when the pitch is delivered. That would at least take away some of that short right field play where you've got the rover playing out there halfway between the dirt and the wall, and it's a ground ball off of the bat of a big lefty power hitter, and he's able to throw him out at first base from short right field. I think, Rich, in general, we as people who love baseball have to look at this and say, are we really capturing the essence of the game? Is this really the way the game is meant to be played? And if the game is evolving in a way that's counter to the game's essence, I think you have to take a really hard look at changing the rules to make sure that the spirit of the game is preserved and is engaging, especially young fans, as much as it can.
Well, we're scheduled to have the commissioner on in our D.C. shows, so we'll ask the commissioner that then. When we're at the All-Star game, how hot will the Manny Machado market be, do you think, with the trade deadline, I think 10 days hence at that point in time?
He is the biggest prize, Rich. I think on the trade market this summer, Manny Machado, because of the multi-positional value he's got, he can play some short, he can play some third, whether it's the Dodgers to play shortstop, whether it's the Phillies or the Braves, those younger up-and-coming teams, I could see him being a great fit there. The Yankees and Red Sox, less likely now. They've got enough, Rich. They've got enough. I think he's going to the National League. I'd love him in Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee is a sneaky, bold team right now because they could have gone for it last year. They had a young GM, David Stearns, who's very good. And it turns out Jose Quintana goes to their rivals in Chicago. And really, the Cubs never looked back last year during the regular season. I think now the Brewers, whether it's a starting pitcher or maybe one more impact infield bat like Machado, I would love Machado going to a team like the Brewers and really enliven that National League Central race.
Well, I mean, if you're trying to peg one player who might tip the balance in a postseason in the same way that you just mentioned with Jose Quintana, for me, having, following the Yankees as I do, Garrett Cole could be that guy that the Yankees had him targeted,
yes,
and couldn't get him or didn't get him,
right?
And then he goes to Houston, and he has been phenomenal, part of a rotation that is off the charts, leading teams like the Yankees. I don't know, are the Red Sox looking for pitching too when it all comes down to it? I guess everybody could use it.
Everybody is,
but
right?
So what's the pitching market going to look like in July? There doesn't seem to be a Verlander out there this year that somebody could just say, all right, we'll take his absurd salary on.
Right.
And is there anybody out there?
Well, it's interesting, Rich. I would say Cole Hamels maybe fits that description a little bit of Verlander type, someone who's achieved so much earlier in his career, is on a larger contract. And I know when we talked last year at the deadline, we were sitting right here having this conversation. Verlander was a big topic of discussion back then.
Well, Houston was so, I mean, I think that Dallas Keuchel went on record saying our front office is not trying very hard because they didn't pull the trigger at the deadline, but did obviously when it was
in the waiver period. It was such the way
last
things
second, literally
exactly
a last second.
Yeah, Verlander's told me the story that basically it was 11:59 and 57 seconds, the timestamp of the email that confirmed that the trade happened. It was literally seconds. And, of course, that transaction, Rich, changed the whole course of the playoffs and what happened not far from here at Dodger Stadium in Game 7. And, of course, Verlander pitched Game 6. But it was amazing the way that Verlander swung that entire postseason picture on that one decision with seconds left before the deadline. And I think, too, we talk so much about the way that the great pitchers like Verlander can reinvent themselves. And I think we're seeing it happen a little bit with Felix Hernandez in Seattle. He's had a good run here recently. Felix has never pitched in the playoffs, Rich. A great player, a Cy Young winner, has never been in the playoffs. And with the Buffalo Bills finally making the playoffs last year, the Mariners, another great national team when you think about Griffey and the heritage there, they have not made the playoffs since 2001. That's the longest postseason drought in all of major pro sports. They are in position to end that drought right now. And I think for them, we talk about the pitching market, whether it's a J. Happ from Toronto maybe going to Seattle or one of the more controllable pieces. One name to remember right now, Blake Snell, the near no-hitter last night. Blake Snell in a what's a pretty thin pitching market right now unless Jacob deGrom is moved by the Mets. Blake Snell is a name to watch very carefully. He has really emerged, a young lefty there with Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is always in that sort of rebuilding mode or at least looking for ways to optimize the value of their players. Blake Snell right now is a big-time name.
So to bring it all full circle with us talking in the first segment with you about Mike Trout's only played in 3 postseason games and what a shame that is.
Yeah.
Felix Hernandez is like, hold my cerveza.
Right. Never.
0. Yeah. I mean, and so last thing for you is Bumgarner. That's a pure fantasy. I mean, because obviously the Giants have a shot here, just 3 out of the wild card, 4.5 out of first place. But, you know, that's
question.
definitely a Yankee fan fantasy that somehow Mad Bum winds up with the Yankees and he adds them to this list of so many generationally talented young players for October.
It's a great point. And I think that's a team to watch really carefully, Rich, in the coming weeks, because there's some optimism that maybe once Samardzija and Cueto get back and rolling, that they could get back into this National League West race. But I look at the way the Dodgers are playing right now and say to myself, I don't see the Giants passing them. And if the Giants are not going to pass them, and they've already invested so much money in this year's team, they've got an old team. And when you've got an old team that's not in first place, you'd better take a long look at ways to get younger and reposition yourself for the future. And if that's the case, Bumgarner being available, I would say check back in a couple weeks at the All-Star break when you're there in D.C. I think that the Bumgarner trade possibility, if the Giants have a rough couple weeks, could be very present and very real at that point in time.
All right, last thing for you. I was told Don Bowie, my coordinating producer, got in my ear and say, you, John Paul Morosi, who I know lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan, you have some interesting information on how Harbaugh called up C-Webb and said, let's get together. Let's try and
Well, I don't have the inside story on that, exactly how the conversation went, but I would say this, as a Michigan resident and lifelong Michigan fan, I'm excited. I think Chris Webber belongs as part of the family, although Michigan has never quite been so great in football as it was when you were there as the honorary game captain. So I think we need, Rich, come home, back to Ann Arbor. We need you back because the last time you showed up, the Maize and Blue were 1 spot away from that Big Ten title game. So I think we need you back on campus.
Well, my timing was perfect because I was the honorary captain against Central Florida in the year that they had no wins.
Hey,
as opposed to the year
you're
they
1-0.
had no losses. My timing was impeccable against UCF. Good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming on here.
Great. It was a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
At John Morosi on Twitter, no H, at JONMOROSI on Twitter.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.